We've got Daniel Rinaldi with us. Rinaldi, if you said it at a certain time in a certain place, I don't know. Maybe that's offensive now to say it that way. I don't know. But maybe we're past that. Who knows? Who knows? At one point it was probably super offensive to make fun of Italian. But you know what? Jersey Shore brought that onto yourselves, and I'm a huge Jersey Shore fan. But I'm just saying. I don't know if you've watched that show at all, Daniel, but Jersey Shore really brought a lot of shame to you Italian Americans, and so maybe a little deserve it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. The Jersey Shore was something.
Was that the world? Is that where like in the where in the world you kind of like Northeast America kind of thing? Is that where you grew up in?
Well, I grew up in Queens, New York, but spent a whole lot of time in Jersey in like the mid 2000s. So
of course,
quite familiar with it, and also one day found myself at a New Year's Eve party that was DJ'd by Pauly D. So I'm very deep roots
so
there.
jealous. I'm so jealous. I don't even like going to club music, but if I knew like Pauly D was gonna be there, I would absolutely go and show up. I love Jersey Shore. Cullen knows this about me. I love
Mason loves
TV.
trash TV. He loves
and Jersey Shore.
television.
Jersey Shore is one of my favorite shows of all time. And Cullen and I grew up in like the Midwest in South Dakota, where there weren't a lot of Italian people at all, and so any sort of like culture like that where it's just like it's totally foreign to us, I just ate all of that up. And so Jersey Shore was one of those where it just felt like this is so foreign to what I grew up with that I want to know what this is like. I wish I was a part of it. It was a whole thing.
Mason, you need to change your lingo on it, and you need to say you're just working on cultural literacy.
Yeah. I'm trying to be more cultural, like I'm trying
Culturally
to be a
literate,
good human, I want to learn of the Italian American ways. I want to make damn good lasagna. I want to make some good baked ziti.
Dude, I love a good baked ziti.
See, you know. Well, Daniel, we didn't bring you on here to just talk about Italian American culture. We brought you to talk about something probably even worse: mental health in the alternative music scene. I can't imagine something that is probably known for just, when I think of mental health, I don't think the alternative music scene is probably like the prime example of mental health. But I will say, you are talking to two people that are currently in therapy, and we're also in the alternative music world. So if there's any sort of shining star, I do think as much as Cullen and I are not shining stars in a lot of ways, we are probably trying to do our best at least in being alternative emo kind of people that are leading the way. But I think the like intersection around mental health in the alternative music world, there's so much there. Obviously, I think a lot of the culture of it was built on sort of bad mental health and almost even like stereotypes of it. And I'm sure you have lots of thoughts on all of that. But yeah, that's why we want to talk to you. And so we're excited. Obviously, we'll get into all of those things. But before we dive into that, let's ask the most therapist question we could ask. How are you doing today, Daniel? How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. I appreciate that, Mason. Doing well. Can't complain too much. It was a beautiful, rainy and cold day in the state of Massachusetts, so that's always fun. But
you live in Massachusetts?
Yes.
You might be the first person I've ever met that currently lives in Massachusetts.
Really?
I just
Okay.
feel like Connecticut and Massachusetts. I know that those states exist, supposedly. But like anytime somebody brings up where they live, almost at no point does somebody bring up one of those two states. So
your cultural literacy is failing, Mason.
Clearly. I just got to get over to the Northeast a little bit more, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like it's not one of like, especially like, if you're coming from the scene, it's not one of the most chosen places from like the millennial, like, like there's a lot of people in Nashville. There's a lot of people obviously in California, Philly, different certain places. And like, it's also pretty like, it's expensive to live here, so it's not
true.
it's not
The
necessarily
Boston hardcore scene in the 90s and early 2000s was pretty solid though.
Yeah, no, solid. Still huge, solid metal scene in Massachusetts. Like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Palladium in Worcester, but that's like the hub of metal in Massachusetts. If there's a metal show or a hardcore show for that matter, it is going to be at the Palladium, and they literally bring in everybody.
Sure. All right, so I'm very curious how you got started on this journey. You played in Bedlight for Blue Eyes, and you did the whole touring thing. You did the scene. You had pretty great credentials and everything like that. So what brought you to the point where you said, hey, mental health is going to be a focus of mine following a band?
Yeah, I think it was obviously like as the band ended, it was my own struggles with mental health, and then realizing, like, you had mentioned before, that it really wasn't something that existed, either whether you were directly involved in the scene, whether you were in a band or crew or whatever, or if you were just a fan going to a show. It just didn't exist. It existed on paper, right? So if we're thinking like mid 2000s, like it existed in like t-shirts and wristbands and stuff like that, but like it really wasn't something that was focused on until we started, I think, seeing problems and issues crop up and different things like that. But for me, it was my own probably struggles after not being in a band anymore and kind of coming out of that going like, well, what do I do now? And everyone else that I knew had graduated college and were getting their first, real jobs. And I was kind of like, well, what do I do now? I dropped out of college. What's going to happen? And I was, pushed by my girlfriend then, my now wife, really go back to school and see if that was for me as an adult. And that's what it ended up being. And it's kind of just like taking what I love the most about being in a band, which was human connection for the most part, which was like, every day you're meeting new people, you're talking to them, you're hearing their stories. And it was kind of taking that and kind of just filling that void with this kind of new path, which was mental health. And, pretty much you're sitting down having conversations with people, daily. So what better way to connect to humans? So that was kind of the route that I went.
Yeah, I was just about to ask, like, I would imagine there's like some skills, as much as we kind of think like being in a, metal band versus being a mental health professional is probably like two very different professionals. And they probably are in very, certain ways. But I would imagine there are certain things that are happening between both industries or both kind of professions, if you will, that probably do relate a lot. And like you said, like being in a band, especially a touring band, you're meeting lots of different people. You're meeting fans that might have, their own stories of why that your music connects with them. And you hear those stories, and that's, you're probably the kind of conversations you're having, especially with fans, probably feels somewhat similar to the kind of conversations you're having with maybe a client who might be experiencing depression or whatever other, sort of thing they might be going through.
Yeah, 100%, especially now where my main focus is based in artists, crew, and creatives, right? Like that's the majority of my caseload and what I do. So there's insane parallels now because not only is it, I know what they're kind of going through on the road, and I know the language and what they've been through, and know that it's not this wonderful vacation that, someone from the outside looking in might see. So it kind of, there's a lot of parallels now, but even before, like you said, talking to someone at a merch table and being able to hold a conversation and really listen to their story and why they came to a show or why a song affected them does translate to when you're sitting across from someone and they're telling you some of the most personal things that are going on in their life, and the ability to kind of sit with them in that and offer them a different perspective or offer them just a person to sit with them through that is very similar to certain things that I remember doing when I was on the road with fans that were like, hey, this song really changed my life, or I drove 3 hours to be here. I'd love to spend some time talking to you. And it's like, you went outside by your bus or van and you talked to those people and you gave them that time. So there's a lot of similar things there.
Yeah. And, I think you brought up something earlier that was kind of interesting to me that I hadn't ever thought about. And that's this idea that though the fans have all these, these missions and these organizations that are aiming to try to, talk someone off a ledge or to reduce self-harm and to try to, bring mental health to the forefront of everything. You think of like To Write Love on Our Arms and things of that sort,
yeah.
right?
Right.
But the individuals that are kind of the reason for people being at festivals and shows in the first place are often the ones that are struggling as much, if not more, than anyone else. And I'm curious where I'm curious why that hasn't been a thing. Like why don't we have, especially when we're talking about like the emo scene, which is I think is more along the lines of like where Bed Light for Blue Eyes is.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of stationed, right? When we think about the emo scene, I mean, we're talking about as emotional of lyrics as we can possibly get, right? Mm-hmm. So it becomes cathartic again for the fans, but is it still cathartic for the artist? Is it after you played it 1,000 times, from your personal experience and then also from your professional experience, first of all, why do you think there wasn't why there hasn't really been much of a focus for artists' mental health? And B, can it be normalized in a way that it is commonplace?
Right. I think we're getting there. We're a long ways away. There are companies that exist now that are helpful. There's a company called Backline who does a lot of great work. I work with them often, and they're there for crew and artists to kind of help get them set up with any type of help they might need. I think when we talk about, the emo scene and we go back years, it was unheard of, right? Like there still is stigma surrounding it, but no one talked about, like, you talked about it in songs and people related to it, but no one was really using their platform to talk about mental health or talk about things directly. And I think that was based on stigma, based on where we were in the culture at that point. We weren't especially if you talk about like a male dominated space, men weren't talking about they're still not talking about their mental health. And especially back then, you weren't having these larger than life characters talking about their mental health and talking about the other things that they were going through, because then you'd have to start really talking about some deep, interesting topics that no one was ready to talk about, right? If we talk about like alcoholism in the scene, if we talk about inappropriate behaviors in the scene, all that stuff, right? Like then you start having to talk about that. Obviously later on, this stuff started to kind of come up and we started to hear about it. But back then it was like, I remember being on the road and dealing with things and like talking to like label mates or talking to people at the label, and they're like, you're an 18-year-old, 19-year-old dude on tour, like suck it up. Like, it is what it is. And now we're getting to a place where artists are more willing to talk about it, but there's still not this from the inside help that I think they're searching for, right? There's a lot of outside companies that are great, that do work within the industry, but I don't think there's enough people that have been through it, that can relate to it, that can help them feel like they're not struggling and battling this alone, that this is something that they can kind of sit with someone who's been through it, who knows the lay of the land, that can help them. But we are getting to a place where there are more people talking about their mental health, talking about, the things that need to be talked about from artist to artist, crew to crew. But also I think it's just as important for the fans to hear that too, to know that these people that are up on stage or they're like, sure, it's really awesome and sexy to see the tour lifestyle, right? And the person up on stage, but once we get to know that they're human and they struggle just like we are, it reduces that pedestal dynamic, and it reduces a lot of what we see in the scene. So we're getting to a space, we are a far way away from that, a perfect world, but we're not where we were in, say 2006.
Right. It's interesting the way you talk about this, because especially when it comes to, like, let's say the emo scene again, which like your band was pretty involved in, especially in that, like early 2000s phase of like the, especially like Warped Tour era, right? Or the height of Warped Tour era. One of the things that we would often like, it's interesting you're talking about like a lot, especially like male dominated kind of music again, which was a lot of like Warped Tour music that, Cullen and I listened to growing up. There was a lot of lyrics that would talk about like struggles that one was going through, especially when it comes to like a breakup or whatever, right? But in a way where, and I'm curious, like, what your thoughts are on this, where there was a lot of like sort of honesty or openness about one's emotional state, hence emo. Like, it was like, it was emotional, it was emotional hardcore, right? But there was something about, it was like a sulking of it, like it was almost like a glamorizing of the fact that I'm going through something difficult, and because of that, it was like I got to lean into that difficulty in a way where I'm not trying to like actually improve on it. I'm just trying to like, hey, woe is me kind of type of thing. And I'm curious, like, your thoughts on that. Like, there clearly was a honesty and openness about one's emotional state in that world, especially during that time, lyrically, but it didn't feel the same way as like somebody who was actually using their lyrical content as a way to like actually process their own emotions. Do you think I'm right in that?
No, I think 100%. I think what was going on then was a lack of tools and resources, right? So a lot of us were all finding our community and finding our spaces in those concerts and at those shows and those festivals, but there was a lack of tools and resources. So you can have the lyrics, or you can go to the show and scream the lyrics, and that's great. You find that the language that is kind of going on in your head, and you're finding the words for it, but then what, right? Then you just go right back home to the abusive parents, or you go right back to the green room to the bottle of alcohol, or you go, so there's no tools there to kind of, okay, you did the thing, you said the thing, now what? Where it was, you said the thing, and now there's nothing there for you to kind of find safety in, other than I'm just going to keep coming back, because if I scream into the void loud enough, someone will help me, but there was no help there for any of those people to say like, hey, I could see you're hurting and I could see you're struggling. Here's this resource that I can give you, or here's this thing that I can give you. And now we're in a space where that happens more, where we have different companies that like Hope for a Day or Heart Support, or these other companies that are at shows that are giving people a space to, meet at a merch table and go like, oh, hey, I've never been to therapy. You have. Can you tell me about it? Or an artist might message me, or a crew member might message me because they see my stuff on Instagram, and they might go, oh, that wasn't there before. Let me see if this is right for me. Where I think where we're talking about, like, it was like you got to a point and then there was this giant barrier there that if no one knew how to like climb over it, or no one knew how to find their way past, like, getting lyrics out, getting this pain out, but then what?
Right, right. It did seem like, especially during that era, especially with like an organization like To Write Love on Her Arms, which we mentioned just a bit ago, my sense of like the mental health world was it had to be that bad before you got the mental health therapy that you needed, right? Like it had to be to the point where you're self-harming, right? And I think maybe, and I would imagine, I'm curious like your thoughts on this, but my sense was during that emo era, at the height of it seemed like there was a sense of we only need help if it gets to that point. Obviously we're very aware, at least some of us are aware, that like there's so many things that you need to do beforehand before it should get to that point.
Right.
But I'm curious, like, what was that like a sense that you got as well, that like there's a reason why, and obviously the work that To Write Love on Her Arms was doing was important and incredible work, and also it seemed like we had this like weird or wrong misinterpretation that it had to get to that point of self-harm before we actually sought out help.
Yeah, I agree with you. I definitely think there was this kind of space in the air where it was like, hey, if this is like, oh, well, I'm not there yet. Well, I'm not here yet, right? I'm not self-harming. I'm not, talking about, ending my life or anything like that. So I definitely think there was that space. And then like another part that like maybe it's a little bit more of a hot, I don't know, it's probably not a hot take, but like I think there's part of it too where a lot of those companies, especially then, there was a lot of marketing and a lot of like cool t-shirts and a lot of things that I think muddied the waters, where it like instead of people like doing the work, right? Like, and really figuring out where they needed to go and what they needed to do. It was like, well, I'll buy the shirt to help the next person. And I'm going to wear this shirt because this is what we're all doing, or I'm going to wear the wristband. I'm guilty of it too. Like I had like the thick rubber black wristband that most people had. And I think like, it was just like, it became something to be a part of instead of just like the scene and the emo scene and things that we've seen kind of go past, it was like something that, you were putting a price tag on stuff and you were putting a cool design on stuff, but we weren't making any sort of waves that were sticking that maybe could have happened if things were approached in different ways at that time and even now.
So going along with that, we talked about the stigma. And I remember early 2000s, the stigma of mental health and help for mental health was certainly not what it is today. Do you think that the marketing of mental health products, or I don't know if a product is the right word, but it does feel like that. Do you think that was maybe something that helped to relieve some of the stigma? Because if I think about today, and you think about like especially millennials, I mean, we are significantly more we go to therapy much. I was going to say therapized. We go to therapy much more often now than any generation before us, at least in America. So did we maybe at least in some part buy into this marketing ploy, and then actually did find some help? Where it's almost like a delayed effect.
I think it's twofold. I think from this standpoint, like, like we saw what our parents and family and older family members didn't do. We saw what our older siblings didn't do, right? And that led way for us to become more educated in what's going on. Why is this happening to me? Or why do I feel this way? And the information was there, right? Like we were able to access that information way easier than, our uncle who's, 75 years old now, where it's like, there wasn't that. There wasn't, college wasn't necessary. Like there was none of those things happening. And as we all, that are now like, late 30s, 40s are looking at it going like, well, I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that I'm taking care of this thing. Or why do I have trouble speaking, to a group of people? Or why can I not have a relationship that lasts? Or, all of this stuff, I think that's part of it. And I also think too, obviously companies saw a market and said, how do we make the entry point to this the easiest thing possible for people who are in school, people who are, getting their jobs, people who have families, people who don't have time. So that's where like the BetterHelps came from, and all of those things came from, for better or for worse, right? Like I think that, there is a lot of information out there that those companies aren't the best, but I think there was a level of it, being marketed. And obviously now, right? Like we're going to get off of this and there's going to be 100 ads somewhere, somehow that we're going to see that it's going to be like, get a therapist now or whatever it is.
Right.
And it makes it so much easier to access that. Before it was like in the 2000s, right? You went on MySpace or Tumblr and shouted into the void and hoped that somebody maybe liked your stuff or would talk to you about it. And now it's like, there are things, if you look up, mental health or therapy, 100 things are going to pop up. So access is a lot easier, although financially access is not easier, but there's a lot more out there that's being marketed to you or being shown to you, that it makes the entry point into therapy or any mental health service a lot easier.
Yeah, so it does seem like there was a like destigmatization. I don't know, I feel like I'm mispronouncing that, but there was something that happened at some point where to the point where it was like what Cullen was saying. Now it feels like almost like a hip thing. Like, I mean, there's like a whole segment of the population where it's like, if you are somebody who is in therapy, that puts you on a pedestal in a way that like, if you aren't, like there's something weird about that I find interesting. But it got to a point where like it used to be like, I mean, you go just even 20 years ago, if you were to say you were in therapy, there was like a stigmatization of that. Whereas now you almost have to be in therapy if you want to be like somebody who's like a person that's like dateable or whatever, right? Like there's something about like it like totally turned. And what's interesting is, whether that's like the emo world or not, or maybe it's just generally what happened in the culture, there is something that seems to be kind of like along that line of like people who really grew up in that emo world, that the millennials that did, I mean, to the ill that they were back in like the Warped Tour days, there was something that must have changed where it became not only a popular thing, but something where at least there is a destigmatization of it.
Yeah, I often think about this because I often wonder about when that switch was or how that happened. And like part of me is like, we started seeing better examples of it in media and in places, right? Like you start to see shows that break down the stigma because
Frasier.
Right. Or like even for when you think of them, like a lot of millennials or a lot of people that were from the scene don't necessarily want the 75 old white guy behind the oak desk with his degrees on the wall. They want someone who's got colored hair and looks like them. Yeah. So when they started to see that is possible, I think a shift happened then. One, and then two, I also think about how much like things like COVID and the pandemic changed things, where we started to see people were home a lot more. People had more access to reflecting on themselves and reflecting on the things that were going on and saying like, maybe this is my time to explore this. And then a funny one is then they also started to see like the separation of now we know everything about everyone because now everyone's got a soapbox. And I don't want to be like my cousin, or I want to make sure that I'm breaking the generational curse, or I'm making sure I'm taking care of this trauma. I don't want to be like Uncle Steve on Facebook right now that's ranting. I want to go and use this time in a positive way and get help for some of the things that maybe I've been dealing with, or now that I'm in this isolation, my depression is going way up and my feelings of this are going way up. I need to talk to somebody. So I think there was a lot of stuff, but I also think like media wise too, we started to see it wasn't just a thing where it was like, ooh, like you said, ooh, you go to therapy? Why? It was more like, oh, like that's really good that you're working on yourself. And this is actually what therapy can look like. I kind of like that. I kind of dig that it's not this or it's not that. And again, like it's like you said, it's become this like giant green flag, right? Where it's like, oh, you're working on yourself and all of the trauma you've been through. Great. I love that. I'd rather that than someone who's not doing that.
I'm curious.
The only thing
go ahead.
The only thing I don't like about it is when everyone starts talking in therapy speak all the time.
That's a tough one. And again, that's a lot of social media. That's a lot of
exactly
TikTok famous like therapists and doctors and stuff like that, where you watch that and you just kind of like utilize that to kind of like self-diagnose or just slip that into conversations. I mean, I haven't dealt with it in a while, but early on, you know, I was on TikTok and I saw this person talking about this, and I was like, no, like get off of TikTok. Like that's not a place that you should be like self-diagnosing yourself and possibly in the complete wrong way, or listening to people who don't know you. They don't know your situation, and you're going by just what they say. You also don't necessarily know their credential. You also don't necessarily know what they're in it for, right? Most of people on social media are in it to make money. What are they going to do to make money and get followers and get people to buy in? Is they're going to say some stuff that maybe isn't always the best course of action, right? So I think that had a lot to do with like that therapy speak, or when you hear terms like gaslighting all over the place, or you hear all these other terms where you're like, do you even really know? I don't know if you know, but you heard it 4 million times here, so now you're using it, but you're using it in the wrong way. Or like, you know, oh, this person's a sociopath, this person's a this, and it's like, you're
a narcissist.
Yeah, like narcissist is another big one where it's like, I have people come in and they're like, oh, my partner says I'm a narcissist, and I was like, are you like, where's the evidence of that? What is going on? Well, we fought the other day. I was like, well, that's not narcissism. Like, you know, we have to make sure that we're not just throwing these out there, because they are things that can easily become someone's identity very quickly. And the last thing you want to do is have something like that become someone's whole identity when it doesn't need to be.
Right. So actually, what's interesting, what I was going to ask is like on the like flip side of that, or like the reverse of that is, so what you're talking about is like there's a tendency to sort of over therapize oneself or other people. Mm-hmm. What I find myself maybe struggling with, in part because I respect my therapist so much, like I think the world of her. I find myself seeing her as like an authority in my life, the way that maybe other people would see like a pastor in their life, or some other authority in their life, where what she says feels like, oh, like, but my therapist said this, like that must mean something if my therapist said it. And I'm curious, like, and again, like this is something I'm being open and honest right now. I feel like I might struggle with that, while I also want to like hold up the fact that like I think what she says is like really legitimate, important, reasonable, rational. You know, like she like I think she's wise and clearly knows her stuff, and because of that, I find her to be an authority in my life because of those things. And at the same time, I don't want to like put her on this pedestal that now she's sort of, I'm using her authority to like minimize or to sort of erase any other dissenting or critical thought that she might be critical of. So I'm curious, like maybe for you as a therapist, like how do you navigate that? Uh, you know, if there was, let's say there was somebody, a client of yours that like puts you on that sort of like, they really trust you and therefore they like really put you as an authority in their life. Like, how do you navigate that as a therapist? I'm curious. Cause again, I feel like I struggle with that as like a client, cause I just respect the hell out of my therapist.
One thing that I always tell clients is you are the one at the end of the day doing the work. You are the one. I see you for an hour once a week, if that, right? A lot of times, maybe I see someone bi-weekly. Maybe I see someone once a month. The other days of the week is all you, right? And I want to instill into my clients and the people that I work with that the only reason that the therapy and this is strictly my opinion, right? The only reason that I think the therapeutic relationship works so well most of the time is because or that you value it is because you're sitting with someone who has a different perspective and has lived a different life. It's not necessarily that they're this wise person living up in the mountains that has experienced so much. It's just because they're not in it like you're in it, and they can pull themselves away and live in a parallel and go, I can see this differently because I'm not going through it, or this doesn't pertain to me, so I can give you something that you're not seeing, which in turn ends up being like, oh my goodness, light bulb, light bulb, light bulb, which it makes sense to why you or somebody else, or even myself, I go to therapy as well, right? Like even myself, where there are times where I'm like, oh my goodness, this dude's a genius. Like, why didn't I think of that? And a lot of times I have to remind myself to not put someone on a pedestal, because again, at the end of the day, it's good to understand that yes, this person is in your life and they play an important role in there, but you are doing 99% of the work.
Yeah.
And that therapist is only 1% of that thing, because again, at the end of the day, you leave that office or you leave that virtual session and you have to face all of the rest of that life alone. And hopefully the hope is that we bring something to you or we say something back to you that hits in a way, but oftentimes it doesn't, right? There are times when it's not going to hit. There are times when it's not going to do what we hope it does. And that's where I think sometimes the pedestal can get a little tough, is where when it doesn't hit, what do? Right? When it's not, when if I'm talking to you and I go somewhere else, right? And you're like, whoa, why are you going there? Or I challenge you and I say that again and let me know how that sounds to you, because sounds a little off to me. And you go, oh, I didn't realize that I was saying that about myself or whatever. That's an interesting crossroads that builds trust, right? If you and I were working together and we had a moment where I challenge you and maybe you challenge me back and we get through that, that's a step in the therapeutic process and the therapeutic relationship. But I think I always say I'm just someone who loves human connection, who got a different degree than somebody else and is able to sit in someone else's life and put it away after we're done, right? And the therapeutic relationship is special because you found someone that you feel comfortable with, that you feel can sit next to you in that journey, and that's extremely important. And it's okay to respect and care about the therapeutic relationship. It's just we want to make sure that you know that how much work you're doing as an individual, as opposed to me who's just kind of sitting there. And oftentimes, to be honest with you, and this is like me like laughing at my own profession, but like oftentimes we're repeating back a lot of the same stuff, and hearing it out of my mouth just sounds different than when it's in your own head. And you go, oh, that sounded different, right? So it's one of those things. Respect that person, really dig that relationship, but I just want people to know how much work they're doing on their own to help themselves.
It's like very empowering for the other person, for the
100%.
client.
Totally. As someone who's working specifically with, band members and crews and stuff like that, would you say that the main thing that ails that kind of lifestyle, is it isolation, or is it just like other people not understanding what kind of work actually goes into that kind of line of work, or what would you say is kind of like the main thing that you see the most with those kinds of individuals?
It's a bit of everything you just said. I think there's a lot of it is thinking, from the outside world, it looks awesome, right? Like we've seen our favorite bands and it's like, whoa, like look at that. Like that life must be so cool. And then when you're actually living it, it's 14-hour days. It's no sleep. It's bad food. It's alcohol. It's drugs. It's infidelity. It's being away from your kids, missing birthdays, funerals, all of this stuff. And so that's a big part of it. And another one that's a big part of it is, what do you do when you get home and it's silent and no one needs you and no one cares about you the same way that they did on tour, right? There is no person waking you up and telling you every bit of your day that you have to do. There is no food that's being made for you. You're doing all of these things, the noise stops, and how do you deal with that? So it's how most of what I see is that drop off, that kind of re-entry into real life. And then, also another big one again is how to not lose your identity on tour and how to navigate just the different landmines of the touring world.
Along those lines, and obviously we want to eventually get into your top 5, but I'm always curious about this. Some of the best music we've ever heard, and part of the reason why I love the fact that like you were in a band, you made music, you were doing the tour life and all of that for a while. Some of the best music we've ever heard has been written in a place where somebody was very mentally unwell.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious for you as a mental health practitioner, like, what would you say is maybe like how do you think ideally a musician should relate to music when it comes to their mental health? Because there is this time period where it feels like when somebody's like really struggling, that's when sometimes the best music comes out. But like I'm just, but like also we don't want them to stay in that, right? So
Right,
like,
yeah.
how do you like navigate, like as somebody again who's like on sort of the other side of it as not a practicing musician now, like how on the other side of it would you say, oh, that would be the ideal version of relating to your music, creating your music, writing your music, playing it, I'm just curious, are you okay? Like, would you be okay as a practitioner to say like, oh yeah, like get into that mentally unhealthy place so you can write that really good music, but then immediately go into this, like, I'm just curious, like how would you navigate that now as a knowing like both sides of it, like as somebody who has made music and somebody who clearly, really wants to make sure that you're mentally well.
Yeah, I think it's, we have to look at it as like situationally, right? I think you never want to tell someone, hey, go write a song, but go to the darkest depths of your life right now, grab a bottle of Jack and get to it, right? Like that's the last thing we probably ever want someone to do. When I think
Hank
about
Williams is a
like
big fan of that approach, though. I mean, like if
right,
you
and it's not like it's not unique to him, right? Like there are plenty of people in the history of music and also now that all do that. I think now when we look at it and when I think of, you know, some of these songwriters in these modern bands, I think there needs to be a space where they're, you know, I'll be like, for example, if I'm thinking about, and these two just come to mind, like the bands like Dayseeker and Bad Omens, right? We see them with very heavy lyrics and very, very interesting imagery and interesting stuff. And I think what happens there is we want to make sure that like they're writing the music that they want to write, but we also want to make sure that they're okay and asking them how they're really doing and making sure they're getting help and getting the things that they need if they're struggling, right? There are some people that can just turn it on for songwriting, right? And they're not necessarily struggling. They just can write really well, or they can write from somebody else's perspective. But I think that's something where the powers that be that are in the room or outside of the room need to be aware of what's going on and saying like, hey man, like I'm listening to this demo, like this is some pretty heavy stuff. How are you doing? Right? And that's something we never asked, you know, some of these legendary emo people, like we've never asked them like, you know, I think back to like, you know, the first time we heard like Hawthorne Heights say, cut my wrist and black my eyes, right? Where you're like, are you good, man? Like, are you okay? What's going on? Or, you know, some of these other bands where you're like, whoa, like, hey, like, let's check in on you. And no one ever did that. So I think now that's where, like I said, I'd never want someone to throw themselves into the pits of their depression just to write a song. But if you're in a space, make sure you're also surrounded by a good group of people, and you have your people to check in on you and say like, hey man, are you good? Like this sounds heavy, or I know you're going through it right now. What's up? Do you need to step away? Like, what do you need to do? So I think it's important to be surrounded by a good, you know, whether that's your band, your crew, your management. It's important to be surrounded by people who know what's going on as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like, and we've already talked about, like, it just seems like there in the scene, there's more awareness around that than ever before. You know, we Cullen and I we're good friends with Garrett Russell from Silent Planet, and like he's somebody who's such an advocate for that, right? Like, you know, he has his own mental health struggles, and he's somebody who's very open and honest about it, and also is such an advocate for those who are still like going through their own stuff. And so, but that, like, again, like you were talking about, like that kind of honesty in that way. Again, there was maybe honesty about like, I'm going through shit, but like honesty in a way where it's like, I'm going through shit and I need help. That even lyrically, that didn't maybe exist 20 years ago.
No.
And that does seem to be a change. Like, I think even like, I'm blanking on his name, Jeremy from Touche Amore. Like he kind of has that vibe even of like, you know, they've even, you know, some of their most famous songs are about like mental health and him like sort of pleading like I need help just in, you know, as much as we all do. So there does seem to be a shift that's happening, which is really encouraging, I think.
Yeah, 100%. Like, and we're getting some of the, it's really good to see some of the people that are really important in the scene, or people that you wouldn't think are going to talk about their mental health, talking about their mental health, talking about their struggles. You know, you see a lot of people talk about their recovery a lot from, you know, drinking and drugs, and that's so helpful, right? Like you have these giant hardcore dudes, you know, like right off the top of my head, like the singer for Bayway, he calls himself Jayway, right? Like he constantly is talking so openly about his struggles and the lease on life he has now, and that's important for people to see. That's important for fans to see, and other band members and crew members to see. When Noah from Bad Omens takes a step back and says, "Hey, I'm struggling mentally. I need to cancel some shows." Number one, that takes a whole lot of guts to cancel shows, but that allows other people to do that. Garrett, like you said, like, when they're so open about it, it just allows the door to be open, and it allows for people to realize that, from a fan perspective, they realize like, hey, if my favorite singer can talk about this and get help and talk about getting help, maybe I can too. And I think that's where I want to see that pedestal or that power dynamic work, is where fans are doing things in a positive way because their favorite singer or their favorite band member is doing it, not any other way, not any other reason, right? So I think it's great to see a lot of these people really like waving the mental health flag and making it known that it's okay to go and check in on yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like the way you put that. That's a good little bow to put on it. So let's talk about your 5 most influential records.
Okay, so first I'll go Take It Back Sunday, Tell All Your Friends. Only reason I talk about that is because I'll never forget my first Warped Tour was in Asbury Park, New Jersey, on the beach. And I'll never forget, I was about to leave.
So what, Mike, the situation on there? Like, was he showing off his abs to everybody?
No, I think the one that I'm talking about, he might have been a young child. I don't know if he would have even, I don't even know if he would have been like known what Warped Tour was. But I'll never forget, I'm leaving, and all of a sudden I hear the first chords of Cute Out the E start playing, and watching Adam climb the rafters. And this is when he was climbing rafters and hanging upside down. Now we're doing stuff, but we're not doing that. And hanging upside down with the cord wrapped around his neck, just singing that song, and that like changed my life and made me like just take that record and be the only thing I listened to, and made me like, you need to be in a band. You need to do that. Yeah. So that was a big one for me. Another one, which I feel like I'm out on an island, but Lucy Gray by the band Envy on the Coast. A lot of people don't talk about them. They were on Photo Finish Records. They did a lot of touring with the likes of Taking Back Sunday, Circus Survive, The Receiving End of Sirens, and they are by far one of the most underrated bands in my opinion. That record came at a time that I needed it, and they were speaking about all the things I was going through, and like we're talking about, right? Like, it was just, they were saying all the things I needed to hear, and to this day it's a record that holds up insane for me. And I
looks
think
like they played around the same years that you guys were playing too, right?
Yeah, they lasted a little bit longer. They definitely had like wonderful push at a moment, but again, like they were fighting an uphill battle where the bands that were around them were getting pushed, and they were kind of like, what about, like, who's gonna push us? And they were just outside the box enough to where they weren't as poppy as their peers. They weren't as hard as their peers. They just kind of sat somewhere in the middle that the scene wasn't ready for yet. Like, at that time, we weren't looking for an Incubus type band, or we weren't looking for what they might have been going for at that time. We were looking for neon pop, like Mayday Parade, All Time Low. That's what people were really gravitating towards at that point. or from the more metal perspective or hardcore perspective, we were leaning more towards some of those more like influential, like, As I Lay Dying, It Dies
Under
Today,
Oath.
Bleeding Through, Under Oath, like a lot of those bands were the thing. So they kind of sat in the middle, but that record is just absolutely insane. Another one this is going to be a wild one, but it's what got me into music. Abandoned Luncheonette by Hall and Oates. So that's like an old school.
This might be our first Hall & Oates. I love this. I love Hall & Oates.
So that was my first concert I ever went to as a kid. My dad took me to that, and I probably am the only one in the scene that's like seen them like 10 or 12 times in my lifetime. Always been a huge fan, a huge inspiration for me growing up as far as like songwriting and just music in general.
Harmonies.
Yeah,
Oh
harmonies
my
are
gosh.
crazy. They always got a bad rap because they were the first like music video band on MTV, and their music videos were the cheesiest things you've ever seen. But I challenge, now you won't see them play together live because they don't like each other, but they were like the tightest band ever. Their band was always filled with like monster players, like G.E. Smith from the Saturday Night Live band, like T-Bone Woke from Saturday Night Live band, just these monster players that were always fantastic. So that's one I could have put any one of their records, but that was like the first one I heard growing up. And then last I was having trouble with this, but like I was thinking like Jimmy Eat World Clarity, something like that, where like, I mean, again, like I can put most Jimmy stuff on there, right? But like there's something about when you
probably should say Clarity, by the way.
Clarity is the right answer.
But I'm saying like those are things
I say that because it's already it might be the most cited one ever. So like you should just like
really? Okay.
make sure that it's the most cited one. So that's why you probably should say it.
So it's one of those things where it's like when you hear those chords, when you hear that voice, it still is one of those things where like you are instantly back in the moment that you first heard that song.
Yes.
You're instantly back in the feelings that you had when you first, the exact girlfriend you had at the time. The exact friends you had. You knew the exact t-shirt you were wearing. You knew who was in your top 8. Like, exactly what your life was like. And there's not a lot of bands that can do that off of like the first 3 chords of a song. And I think Jimmy Eat World is one of those bands.
Gosh, that album in particular, for some reason, does that more than any of their other ones.
Right. Yeah.
Like I literally remember for every single song, I have like a specific scene of my life that plays out.
Right. And
that album is a good. That album is a good starting place for like every therapist. Is like, all right, where were you when you first heard Clarity? And we'll start. Start there. Let's start there.
Yeah. Let's see if there's some repressed emotions there.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Let's. Yeah. What do you still think about that 16-year-old girlfriend that you had?
Right? Like it's just one of those things where it's like the sounds on that record, like Trombino was like Mark Trombino was like in it at that time. Like. It was just one of those things where it's like, oh man. And again, like there's plenty of other little spots from their catalog that we can go to and we can grab from, but like I don't know, that record to me it's like it just like exactly where you were.
So I know music therapy is a thing, but has there ever been a therapy that says like, all right, I want you to bring in 2 records or like a playlist of songs, and I want you to tell me where you were at with these songs when you heard them for the first time?
Yeah, me. That's who's
you do that?
Yeah.
That's your practice.
So I do.
That's awesome.
There is a lot of that happens, right? Like there are a lot of people that have a hard time articulating what they're going through. and what's happening in their lives or what has happened. And oftentimes the best way to do that is bring in those songs that explain exactly what you're going through. And through those bands and through their words, you find language that you didn't have before. That's why we love those songs, and that's why we come back to them, because they said what we were needing to say at that moment, and they still say sometimes what we need to do in that moment. That's why we love that one metal song, or we love that one song that like is a little bit like weird and violent. You know, like for example, I remember like Bite to Break Skin by Senses Fail was that song that I listened to where I was like, I'm mad, this has to go on. And then there were other songs where I was like, I don't have words for this, but he does, Jim does, you know, like, you know, Dashboard does, like all of these bands like have these words. So there are often times where I will work on that with people where it's like, make your playlist. Like, what was your week like? Make your week playlist where it's like Monday was this, Tuesday was this, Wednesday was this, and it just gives the client a starting point. But then also is just one of those things where it's like, you know, I've done things where like, hey, I've never heard of that one. Like, let's listen to that, and then all of a sudden, like, your client is in tears, and you're really getting to a space where you're like, why did this affect you this way? What's going on? What's happening? What in this song really spoke to you? And that's where, you know, so it's, I utilize that all the time.
That's so cool. I've utilized this thing where like I can journal, and I have journaled and stuff like that. And I find it not very helpful for me. Mm-hmm. But what I do now, I also journal a little bit still, but what I do now is I will make a playlist, like usually like once every 2 weeks, and my emotions, my thoughts, all my feelings just like go into that playlist. And then that's how I journal now. So it becomes like my own,
I love that,
like way to go through everything. And then it allows me, you know, the space to kind of like pull back a little bit and see, all right, why am I feeling that? Mm-hmm. And I think I feel like that should be more commonplace, you know? I feel like that should be like why isn't that like the next step for...
Here's what I say to that. Bring it into it's your session, right? I say this to anyone.
Sure.
If that's what you're doing, bring it in, right? If that's what helps you, bring it in and talk about it and go over it. And I shouldn't be fitting you into my therapy box. I should be doing everything that I can to work with and adapt to what you need and what you need, right? I should never go, hey, Cullen, like I went to school and I studied this and I really am fond of this method. We're only going to do that, and this is all you're ever going to do. If that is what helps you, I want you to bring that in and say, hey, man, I made a playlist, and I'd love to talk to you about it. I would fall off my chair. I would be like, oh, yes, let's please do that. Like, I would love more.
That's probably got to be, like, more exciting, too, for you. Do you actually, like, listen to the tunes as well sometimes?
There have been times, like, especially if I don't know it, where like, you know, people bring in stuff that I don't know all the time because there is certain stuff that I listen to and certain stuff I don't listen to, and I'll like be like, hey, like let's play it, like let's see what this is all about, and we'll listen to the track and like we'll really break it down, like why that's the track that really hit you on that Tuesday at 8:00, right? And I think that's great that you utilize that for journaling, because I tell people all the time, journaling is what you want it to be. It doesn't even have to be words half the time, right? Like you could draw pictures, you can cut out, you can be like old school where like you take magazines and cut out stuff that makes sense to you. It doesn't have to be this daunting school-like task. It could be anything you want it to be. It's just a matter of what is it doing something for you? Yes, keep doing it. I don't need you to write paragraphs off of a prompt that I got from some therapy workbook in my graduate class. I want you to take it and run with it.
Yeah, you're a much better person than I am, because I'd be so judgmental to people's playlists.
Yeah, all I'm thinking about is like, I might have to find a new therapist if I want to try that.
Yeah,
I feel like mine might not go for it.
Yeah, you're sitting there bringing in something. You're like, this is Suffocation, and this is my favorite song by them, and I'd like for you to take a listen to it. And they're like, okay, click. So it's like, but I find that interesting, right?
Like,
I think it's
hey therapist, have you ever heard of Gigi Allen?
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
God. I can't even imagine that. Yeah,
This is my
that would be a
favorite
tough
song
one.
ever by Gigi Allen.
Do you want to watch the
Therapist.
YouTube video, because that's even better?
Yeah, let's watch
know.
a YouTube video. Yeah, let's
Yeah.
really ring it home.
Yeah, that would be so bad. But yeah, I think it's all what you want to make of it, and I think it's sometimes there's gonna be a song where you're like, really, like Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous by Good Charlotte, like, but then like you
I
get
just want to
one
be
where
a
you
rock
never.
star by Nickelback.
Yeah.
Really, Cullen?
No.
Wait, did you say
come on now.
Did you say Kid Rock? Like sort of
new
stuff
Kid
like
Rock?
that. But it was, new Kid Rock. Ba with the Ba was at the time was a jam, right? But like
Right. But like,
Now
but like alternative halftime show Kid Rock. That's what Cullen's really into.
yeah, I could see Cullen. You're so into that. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. That's so
But
funny.
yeah, I think it's what you make out of it. It just adds. It helps lighten some of the barriers that are there in therapy that I think help people walk through the door and stay in it, as opposed to, I'm going to try this out, but I didn't like that, so now I'm not going to do it anymore. The goal is to get you to want to be there and want to work on the things that you want to work on. And if that means bringing in a playlist, if that means, whatever that, having your favorite, like I have all this ridiculous stuff behind me, like if that means like showing something that you're really proud of or whatever it is, like I'm all for it.
Sick, dude. I love that so much. All right, what would you like to plug?
Well, definitely plug my Instagram, Daniel Rinaldi LMHC, where you can find all of my ramblings of mental health, and that's where, if you like, even if I'm not working with you, if you have any questions, I answer my DMs. I talk to people all the time. I love helping people get to where they want to go in therapy or find that first thing. So please feel free.
Is that where people can like book a session with you too, if they want?
Yeah, so that's the one thing that I always talk about. It's real help, real time, right? You're talking directly to me, and there is no 700 steps. If you want to book, like, I give everyone the option of, hey, do you want to do a quick consult to see if we vibe, like, because I never want someone to just like force themselves into a room with me. So it's that, and then it's like, hey, you want to book? Here's the paperwork. Let's start next week. Sort of thing. There is no wait list, essentially. So it's kind of just, hey, let's go. And so you're talking directly to me, and you're booking. If you want to book, we're booking.
And then is there other people like you that have kind of similar kind of vibe, I would say?
There are people out there. I don't know a whole lot of them. There are people out there that have different backgrounds that are working in the same industry. I think a lot of times with this industry, with the stigma and how hard it is, it's hard for a lot of people to break through. I got lucky a year ago, where I posted some posts that went really well, and it allowed me to kind of get a base of people. So I will show up, right? I will be in your feed if that's what you're looking for. But there are people out there. So I like, if you're looking for it, like if maybe I'm not right for you, and you go, hey, I'd really like someone who's female or non-binary. I'd like this person or that person. Reach out, because I can always help you find that person that I maybe know personally that's reached out to me, or I just know of that works in the same space, that does the same thing, that has a touring background, but they might not necessarily be comfortable with talking to me, and that's okay. I don't I don't want someone who's uncomfortable. I want them to feel like they can be, be open. So yes, people do exist. I think it's just so hard to break through the noise of social media and really show up on people's radar.
Yeah,
Sure.
for sure.
Yeah. I can't imagine that it would be very easy trying to be the only guy. So, if you had to be the therapist for every single band member and crew member and management out there, you're going to be a busy dude.
I'd be a busy dude. Like it'd be lovely. Right. And, maybe there's a space where, I'm building something called Soundcheck Sesh right now. It's in baby stages and it's out there. It's kind of built for the touring model. It's built for the green room. It's built as a space where, tours and the people on them get what they need, but don't have to, pay for an extra person to be out there. They don't have to have all the stigma that surrounds it. It's, again, real help in real time on tour. So that's kind of getting built in real time as I'm doing content and having my own practice as well. Soundcheck is eventually going to become the hub for hopefully a bunch of different things.
Awesome. That's good. Anything else you'd like to plug?
So, one thing I think that people don't necessarily know me from or that is I don't know if do you guys remember Bananas in Pajamas?
Yeah, for sure.
They're marching down the stairs, Bananas in Pajamas.
That was like a children's show, right?
Yeah, children's show.
Yeah.
It was puppet kind of stuff looking.
Yeah, they were
right?
puppety bananas.
Yeah.
So it was interesting back in my freshman year of college. I wasn't sure what I was doing. I was kind of in the creative arts, but I actually got employed to design the actual striped pajamas that they wore in the show. So coming down in pairs, blue striped pajamas, that was me.
Whoa.
Oh my gosh. I don't know if you realize how seminal you were to my childhood.
Right. So before the pajamas, they were just kind of in these weird onesie things that didn't look right. When I was looking at the original storyboard, and then I kind of came in and was like, what about this two-piece old school dad pajama sort of thing?
Yeah.
I think it would be interesting. And lo and behold, they went for it. Definitely paid for that freshman year, and then I dropped out, but it was definitely interesting.
Were you recently a part of a design team that made these polka dot aliens that play math rock in Canada?
Dude, I wish. That is an interesting thing. I'm hoping that maybe I can tap into that fashion designer again and create a couple of custom pieces for them though.
Okay.
Yeah.
It feels like
should.
the Bananas and Pajamas, whatever that crew was making that, seems pretty similar to that crew that was it's making
it does a little bit.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, hopefully
math rock band in Canada.
Hopefully there's not a lawsuit coming. I'm just gonna say that, guys.
It does feel a little copyright-ish. I'm just saying.
It does.
I'm gonna talk to the old Banana crew and see what's going on.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, I love that. You must. Mason and I want
Banana crew.
I think Mason and I should start a shock rock band where we wear the most wild stuff and
honestly, a lot of
we'll employ you.
Some of those '90s children's shows that were live action like that. They were really in scary costumes. A lot of the Big Comfy Couch kids the actors for that. That was the clowns in that were they were scary looking.
The dust mites.
And I do think the dust mites. Oh, you're absolutely onto something, Cullen. That could be a total shock rock gig and bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at how many other bands are out there. They have their shtick, right? Some of them do that horror stuff on stage and all those things. You guys could perform live from the comfy couch.
That's right.
Yes, I would love that. I want to do the big clock thing though on stage.
Oh yeah, the yoga, the stretching clock.
Yeah.
So good.
I'm flexible enough for it. I'm flexible
I would pay
enough
good
for
money.
it. It'd be fun.
Oh, at least somebody's paying good money for that, Cullen. All right. Well,
right.
Daniel, thank you so much for hanging out and
Absolutely.
talking about mental health in the music scene. Just such obviously incredibly important work that you're doing, incredibly important conversation. And so thanks so much for chatting more about it. And we'd love to have you on again.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. Thank you guys so much. This was a blast, and thank you so much for the platform to talk about mental health. I think it's always so wonderful when I get that.
Hell yeah, man. Love it.